The next fly that we're going to tie is a parachute dry fly. And you can do this in a number of different color combinations to try and imitate different species of mayflies. And so today what we're going to demonstrate is one that's actually using the Adams gray body. And so we're taking our dry fly hook, and similar to the other flies that we've tied today, we're pinching the barb down before we tie the fly. And we're going to mount that in the vise with the hook shank, or the straight part between the eye of the fly and where the bend starts, roughly parallel to the surface of the table. We're going to use gray thread for this fly to match the Adams gray color, and we're going to spiral wrap 3 to 5 wraps forward and then spiral back over the top of that to attach our thread to the hook, and that's called a jam knot. And so now we can take the tag end of the fly, which is this extra material, and we can cut that excess thread off and be ready to proceed with tying the fly. And so I like to lay down a thread base, and to do that I like to have about an inch of thread outside of the bobbin so that I can control the placement of the thread a little bit better, and then I can also advance the thread just by essentially making a rotating motion using my wrist. And so that lets me move the thread without having to go through a large motion if I was working with a larger length of thread. So the next thing we're going to do is take some of the Antron yarn, and I worked with a piece earlier. The whole Antron yarn is about this thickness, and what we want to do is work with a shorter piece of yarn, and so this is about a half of the thickness of the original yarn. We only want to have maybe between 8 and 16 fibers going into the tail shuck, and so we're going to split that apart again and then stroke the fibers back together to make a nice clump. And since this isn't quite perfectly even, what we'll do is take the scissors and we'll trim some of the excess material off of that, and then we'll measure that against the hook shank, and we want the tail or the shuck to be about the same length as the body of the fly. And so if I grab a hold of the material right there and tie this in at the back with lifting up the thread, capturing the thread between my finger and thumb, pulling straight down onto the top of the hook shank, and doing that a couple of times, then I should keep the shuck material on the top of the shank. And then we'll go ahead and bring the thread forward, binding some of this excess material to the top of the hook shank. And then we'll cut off that excess, and then we're going to work our way back. And there's a fiber that is hiding underneath here that I apologize for blocking the view, but I was just going to take the scissors and trim that out of the way so that it doesn't bother us a little bit later on. And so you'll see right now that if I bring the thread underneath here and lash that down, that the length of my hook is a little bit shorter than the length of the tail, and since this is Antron and is a yarn, we can go ahead and trim that to length this way, and it's a very nice way to be able to adjust the length of that tail shuck. Now we're going to come up to a point that's about a third of the way back, and we're going to take some white polypropylene yarn, and this is something that for making the post I've probably got significantly more material there than what I need. There's a couple of twists in there that are holding it together, so I'm just going to use my scissors to separate that a bit, and let's take and try about a third of the clump of yarn to start with and see how that looks for bulk. that actually looks like a fairly decent amount of yarn and to add for making the post. And what we can do is bring this, and I can do it from either underneath the bottom and create the post, or some people prefer to just put a wrap of thread over and work up. And I'm showing you both techniques because I want you to have the option of which is easier for you to use. Myself, because the post is such an integral part of this, I prefer to flatten it out and have it go underneath and then come up. And so I'll bring the whole post up and around and just pull that up. And I'm going to center it a little bit right here. Now I'm going to bring the thread back from this side, and I'll keep working towards the middle so that way I've got this bundle of yarn coming upwards, and you see that there's not a whole lot of bulk underneath. And what we're going to do now to stabilize this just a little bit more is we'll put a couple of wraps here, a couple more wraps in front. Now what we're going to do is bring the thread carefully around the base and put a few wraps going clockwise across that, and then we'll lock down again and in front, and you see how that reinforces with the post coming straight up. And there's still a couple of little fibers in here that I want to move. There, we got it. Another one coming out the front. And since we now have the post ready to go, we're going to bring the thread back here to the back of the fly where we tied in the shuck, or the tail if you prefer. And we're going to then take some of this gray dubbing and we'll pull a clump of that out and then tease a few of the individual fibers out. And we're going to spin that around the thread to add a little bit of bulk and gray color to the thread. And this is something that you're going to want to use a very, very small amount for each part that you put on, because it's easier for us to make a very thin amount and then build up with extra thread wraps to control the body than to try and deal with thicker clumps on this small of a fly. So you'll see right there we've got between 1.5 inches and 2 inches, which I'm hoping is about the right length for this size fly. And then we're very carefully trying to work around the barbs to get that going for the back, and we'll pull these fibers up and out of the way. And see how we're now just wrapping forwards, creating a nice tapered body to the position back behind the post. And at this point in time, we're going to want to add in the saddle hackle. And so I'm just splaying a few of the fibers there so that we can trim those off. And that helps it catch the thread. And we're going to hold that, I don't know if you can see this, I'll try and back it up a little bit, but I'm bringing that in at a small angle and setting that right beside the post. And then I'm going to trap that with the thread, and then I want to trap the front edge of that piece right here also, because that then ties that in very, very solidly. And having completed that, what we want to do is add just a small amount more dubbing onto the thread. And this is one where when you have a vise that's capable of rotating, it makes it nice to be able to just turn the fly this way and make sure that we've covered most of that white from the post on the bottom. In the event that you have a different style of vise, what you can do is actually very carefully take the fly out of the vise, turn it over in your hands, and make sure that that's covered before we proceed. And then I'm building a little bulk there, and now we want to place a knot on the front of the fly just to hold that temporarily in that spot so that things don't unravel. Then I'm going to back the thread back up so that we've got the shorter amount. Now with this hackle, I can hold this with my fingers because the saddle hackle is very long. As it gets shorter, as you tie more and more flies, you can actually take a pair of hackle pliers and clip that onto the feather and then extend it, making it easier to hold. I'm not going to do that right now just because we've got this whole length of feather, but be aware that makes it easier to handle. And what we're going to do is take the saddle hackle and we're going to pull that, and we duck down on both sides so that each wrap is underneath the previous. And I like to do about 3 wraps. And so we've got those. And then what I like to do is take my fingers and stroke the barbs away this way and back this way so that I can capture my thread right here, bring that over the hook shank. And I don't know if you were able to see that. I'll try and do it again using my non-dominant hand. But see how I'm trying to slip that thread under the barbs? And we get a few wraps, and then I can pull the rest of the material where I take the barbs on the far side back that way and the close side this way, and then that leaves most of the feather intact, and I hope you can see that. Then we're going to put a couple of locking wraps there. We can lift the saddle hackle, slide our scissors down right to the base of that and snip it off, and then we can pull the rest of these fibers back. And it's not uncommon to have a few barbs that you trapped right there. And so what we carefully want to do is make sure we don't snip the thread. In fact, I might put another half hitch in right here before we try and trim those barbs out of the way, just for safety. There we go. And now I can come up here, trim those excess ones out of the way, bring this back, put my finishing knots on 1.5 times. I trapped a couple more barbs, but we'll clean that up afterwards. Bring that right behind the eye of the hook there, and use the double hitch. Now we'll trim the thread and get rid of that single barb that's right there. I'm going to have to use my hands to stabilize this a bit. There we go. And what we're going to do now is take all of these barbs that we wrapped around, and we'll work those back to where we've got the full circle around the post. And when the fly lands on the water, that parachute is what holds it up on the surface. And then we can come back and cut the post. If the fly is about that long, we want to cut the post at about that height. And some people will trim that a little bit shorter and leave it flat. And I'm going to hold something behind this just so you can see. That's a little bit long for the post, but what I like to do is come back and shape this a little bit by coming to the front of the fly and cutting an angle up that way, and then on the back of the fly I like to cut down at an angle that way, and it makes a little bit more natural silhouette to the fly. The other thing it does is it takes quite a bit of the weight that was in the top part of that post, lowering the center of gravity closer to the body of the fly, and that makes it to where the fly will land upright on the water almost every time. If it's top heavy, it sometimes wants to tip over. And so those are just a couple of little things. And there's a barb right here that we're going to go ahead, or a fiber that I'm going to turn so that we can trim that up a little bit more. And then there's a couple under here that were slightly trapped that we'll trim up. And that completes our parachute dry fly in an Adams gray.